Hey guys, and welcome back to Mad About Skin. In today's video, we are talking cruelty-free skincare, but we're actually going to delve a little bit deeper. We're going to pick it apart, look at some of the terminology, and try and work out why cruelty-free means so many different things to so many different people. Ultimately, we're going to help you guys as consumers to understand whether it's more than just a bit of a marketing con, or whether actually there's substance behind a lot of the cruelty-free claims. Hopefully, I'll be giving you some hints and tips as we go along if you do want to go completely cruelty-free in your skincare, of how you can work out which companies are cruelty-free and how you can make your own ethical decisions around the sort of brands you want to purchase from and the sort of products you want to buy into. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, keep on watching. The reason I wanted to film this video now is because as of the 1st of January 2021, China is the last country to declare that they no longer require animal testing to happen on cosmetics and skincare before they can be sold into their territory. This was like the last holdout of animal testing. Now that Chinese authorities say that they're happy for brands and companies to submit their own testing data to them in lieu of the requirement for animal testing, this is like the last piece in the puzzle before hopefully we can see an end to animal testing going forward. However, these things and companies do change slowly, so there's a couple of things I want to pick apart. So let's delve into it a little bit more detail. So first of all, just because China has declared they no longer require animal testing to be able to access their market, it doesn't mean that it's illegal. In most countries across the world, it is still legal to test on animals, and companies are usually quite slow to change. Animal testing is ruinously expensive. It's also a lot less effective than some more modern forms of testing in terms of proving efficacy and safety of products. However, companies tend to stick to what they know. They've been animal testing for years, and it is quite difficult to get them to change. Whilst China have said they'll accept paperwork submitted in lieu of animal testing, doesn't mean companies will take them up on that offer. So this is something to bear in mind. Big companies and organisations such as L'Oreal have yet to declare that they are going to be using this get around this workaround and submitting their own paperwork. For a lot of companies, the bureaucracy, the red tape, the having to submit paperwork might actually be a little bit of a detriment to them, and might think actually it's easier to just pay the Chinese authorities to test on animals on their behalf, to do away with all the bureaucracy and the requirements around paperwork submission. So we really need to wait to see and hear from some of the big companies and conglomerates whether they're going to take China up on this offer, which I very much hope they will. Until that happens and we have those declarations, we still should be a little bit mindful that those products, those companies and those products that sell into the Chinese market may still be tested on animals, and this isn't like a carte blanche to declare all of the brands which sell into China now cruelty-free. I'm going to leave a link to some websites below that are monitoring the situation so you can get an up-to-date impression on when some of these big companies will actually declare that they're fully cruelty-free, because they're going to take the Chinese authorities up on the option of the workaround and no longer require and pay for animal testing in China in able to be able to access that market. So I'll leave some links below if you do want to explore them in a little bit detail. I'm delighted by this because a lot of my favourite brands and products from people such as La Roche-Posay I don't consider to be cruelty-free, because whilst that brand doesn't test on animals themselves, they do allow animal testing so they can access the Chinese market. Hopefully brands such as La Roche-Posay, which are some of my favourites, will now be able to use this workaround as a way of guaranteeing that none of their products from start to finish have been tested on animals. Secondly, I want to come on to the ingredients in products. I think it's really a lack of understanding around the fact that just because a product is branded cruelty-free doesn't mean that the ingredients which are used in that product haven't been tested on animals. Now, a lot of people are a bit shocked by that and think surely, as a bare minimum, none of the ingredients should have been tested on animals. Well, that's because traditionally, many years ago, animal testing was the norm. It was the only alternative. There were no alternatives to it. And so a lot of the traditional older ingredients have been tested for safety and efficacy on animals, and that testing carries forward. Vitamin C ascorbic acid is a really great example. It's used in a lot of products, and a lot of products by cruelty-free brands. However, that was tested in the 30s, 40s and 50s using animal testing, and that testing has carried forward. We know it's safe to use in our products and on our human skin because of those trials and that testing done with animals many decades ago. In a lot of ways, there's a time cutoff. A lot of brands now use a time cutoff to say from this date point, none of the ingredients or our finished formulations will be tested on animals. Whilst I actually think this is fine, I don't expect companies to, just for the sake of it, go and do testing on ascorbic acid so that they can say that our ascorbic acid was actually tested animal free. We know it's tested. We don't need to go through that whole process again. I actually think that's okay. But for a lot of people, that is still a little bit problematic. Just because your product is labelled cruelty-free doesn't mean that every single one of those ingredients in there hasn't at some point been tested on animals in the dim and distant past. And so a lot of these products have date cutoffs by which at this point onwards none of the product's ingredients or the final product was tested on animals. The most common date used is the 11th of March 2013. This is kind of used as an international standard or semi-international standard. This is the date which the European Union said all of the products and ingredients must not be tested on animals from this point. You can use animal testing supported data before then in order to justify the inclusion of certain ingredients in your products, but from that date onwards none of the ingredients or the finished product can be tested on animals. I think this kind of makes sense to me, but a lot of people do call it out as problematic. If they want to be entirely 100% totally cruelty free, this can be a little bit problematic and something to be mindful of. A third point I want to call out is cruelty-free doesn't mean vegan. This is a whole minefield. A lot of the recommendations I make on this channel are cruelty-free. They haven't been tested on animals. However, they might contain animal-derived ingredients. A lot of people find that problematic because particularly vegan and people living a plant-based lifestyle say, how can something be cruelty-free if an animal has been killed in order to obtain the ingredient, which is then included in the product? I get that. I totally understand that. That's not my personal definition of cruelty-free, which I stick to having not been tested on animals, but I do totally understand that. And so if you're looking to live an entirely vegan and cruelty-free in terms of no animal testing lifestyle, you need to look for the joint logos. You need to look for the cruelty-free statement, which guarantees not tested on animals. You need to check that the product isn't sold into mainland China as a second lock on ensuring it is cruelty-free. And you need to look for the vegan logo and check the ingredients yourself. Seems like a lot of work, but if you're committed to being entirely free from animal-derived ingredients and cruelty-free, you need to remember the two things do mean totally different things, and so you need to look for both when you're making a purchasing decision. The fourth point I'm going to make is then we come onto the whole realm of palm oil. So palm oil is not animal derived, it's derived from palms, from plants. So again, you can use if you are vegan. However, most palm oil is derived in an unsustainable way and cuts down the territories and the habitats of particularly, we call out a lot of animals, but a lot of people call out gorillas as being particularly vulnerable to palm oil exploitation. It's generally seen as not being a sustainable or ethical ingredient to have in your food or in your skincare. However, you can still call a product cruelty-free and include palm oil as an ingredient. You can still call a product cruelty-free and vegan and have palm oil as an ingredient. So we need to be mindful of this because a lot of people have called me out when I've recommended products that have contained an element of palm oil within them that are saying, well, actually, it's just as cruel to be tearing down habitats and decimating wildlife than it is to be tested on animals. In a lot of ways, I agree. However, you can still call a product, companies are able to call a product cruelty-free and still include palm oil. So if that's a consideration, you need to look for that as well. If you can kind of see as we're going along, you need to really be building up a picture of what it means to you and then do your own due diligence and research, because just jumping for the cruelty-free label alone isn't enough if you're looking for more than just a product which isn't tested on animals. Finally, we come onto the ethics of the companies themselves. So, if you take, for example, a company like L'Oreal, a huge conglomerate which has so many brands that sit below it. Some of our absolute favourite brands, and those that are called out a lot, sit below the L'Oreal brand and name. Now, L'Oreal itself does not test on animals anymore. It sells into mainland China as an organisation, so there is an element of animal testing which has been funded and paid for by L'Oreal in order to access that market. We'll wait and see if they opt to use the workaround so they no longer require that animal testing, and I think it would be very, very much welcomed if they did. However, you might also want to consider the history of the organisation itself. So L'Oreal has a huge amount of power and influence across the globe because it is such a big corporation. They lobbied, when the EU decided to ban animal testing on all of cosmetic products within the European Union, L'Oreal lobbied exceptionally hard, first of all, to not have the ban at all. They wanted to be able to still continue to test on animals, and they spent a fortune on lobbying European politicians to allow that to happen. When it became clear that they were onto a loser with that one and it was going to happen anyway, they then lobbied to delay it for as long as possible so they had the time to adjust and adapt to that. As a result, a lot more animal testing happened, which probably didn't need to happen had that ban have happened earlier, and that is down to L'Oreal themselves. So whilst L'Oreal don't test on animals, and hopefully they'll use the Chinese workaround and opt out to no longer require it to access China, really their history and their ethics leave a lot to be desired. So another consideration you might want to make is to not buy into companies and corporations which have a, let's say, patchy history when it comes to animal testing and their own ethics. So if you could see, let's conclude, let's bring it all together and say, actually, it means so many different things to different people. So do I think cruelty-free skincare is a con? No, absolutely not. If a product is called cruelty-free, that usually means that the product itself and the ingredients within it haven't been tested on animals after a specific date. That to me is enough, combined with checking that they don't sell into mainland China, and that is enough for me to guarantee that product is cruelty-free and make that recommendation to you guys. However, that might not be enough for someone who wants to live a vegan lifestyle, wants to make sure that there's no palm oil in their products, or that the ethics of the companies we're talking about have a really robust past. So these are things you all have to work out before you can fully satisfy yourself as a consumer. Different people have different purchasing motivations. So I always say, do your research, do your due diligence. I'm happy to stop at a certain point in the process and say, I'm happy for something to be cruelty-free. It's not been tested on animals. But if you're living a plant-based lifestyle, you might want to take that a step further. And hopefully I'll leave some links to some really good tools below that you can do that. Overall, is it a con? It's certainly not. It's certainly something we should be looking for, especially because there's loads of great up-and-coming and affordable brands which offer cruelty-free, true cruelty-free skincare. But it doesn't mean that there's been no animal exploited at all in the process. That's something you might want to be a bit mindful of if this is your primary purchasing concern when you're looking for new skincare. Have you found this video informative, thought-provoking? Leave me your comments below. Are you someone, where do you stop in the whole cruelty-free journey? What is your point? Are you not bothered by the whole process at all? Do you stop where I do at the knowing it hasn't been tested on animals, or do you look a little bit further into some of the other ingredients involved? Leave me a comment below and let's get the conversation going. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it, because I think this is a message which actually we should be getting out. Just because something is badged as cruelty free doesn't mean it's free from animal derived ingredients, and that so an animal hasn't been killed at some point in the process to fund and to provide those ingredients. So let's get this message out there, and wherever you are in the world, guys, I hope you're staying safe and well, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care. Bye.